Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room on this Wednesday. I'm ABC's Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us today. Some breaking news for Deputy Political Director Mary Alice Parks to dig into. The former Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, who's flirting with a run for the White House, has faced some turbulent times lately as multiple women, 4 in fact, have come forward saying they were uncomfortable with the Vice President's affectionate behavior, his touching them, in one case kissing her hair. The former vice president just put out a statement on video. This is his first in-person response to these allegations and to some criticism he's taken from his fellow Democratic leadership. Take a listen to what Joe Biden had to say.
You know, social norms have begun to change, they've shifted, and the boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset. And I get it. I get it. I hear what they're saying. I understand it. And I'll be much more mindful. That's my responsibility, and I'll meet it. But I'll always believe governing, quite frankly, life for that matter, is about connecting with people. That won't change, but I will be more mindful and respectful of people's personal space. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I've worked my whole life to empower women. I've worked my whole life to prevent abuse. I've written, and so the idea that I can adjust to the fact that personal space is important, more important than it's ever been, is just not thinkable. I will.
So pretty remarkable to see a high-profile politician tacitly acknowledge that their behavior was inappropriate, as he did in this case, and say he's going to change. That's no small thing, but there wasn't an apology in there.
I think it's a really interesting statement because there's no explicit apology, but a huge acknowledgement. He doesn't deny this behavior. He hasn't since the beginning, but he has said he understands that it makes some women uncomfortable. Now, I have no doubt that some people will look at this statement and say, okay, he is clued in. He is trying to respond. And others will say, just not good enough. If he made people feel uncomfortable and if he crossed lines and violated them, then he needs to say sorry.
Yeah, and we've heard from some of his would-be fellow competitors in the Democratic race sort of create some boundaries of, around the different levels of misconduct and behavior. Beto O'Rourke, most recently, just yesterday, wouldn't disqualify Joe Biden for this, but said certainly it needs to be addressed, it needs to be corrected. Nancy Pelosi said similar. So the entire Democratic field is sort of trying to get their arms around how to treat Joe Biden.
Exactly. Democrats so far have wanted to be the party that stands with women. They want to be seen that way. The party that acknowledges when women feel disrespected and that don't question any perceived disrespect from women. They want to distinguish themselves from Republicans in that manner, and that's been their point sort of through the Me Too era. But you're right that none of the Democrats who have jumped into the 2020 race have said in any way that they think this possible behavior from Joe Biden is disqualifying. They are quick to draw a contrast to the president and allegations against him.
That's right. So we'll see how they continue to respond to his statement on camera today. The first time, again, that we're hearing from the former vice president on these allegations. We'll also keep a close eye on whether more allegations, more women come forward feeling uncomfortable or perhaps, something else with his behavior and in any event.
And how voters respond if he starts actively campaigning.
That's right.
I mean, there was a lot of buzz and expectation that he was going to announce soon. So if he does, then he's out there on the rope line and he's out there shaking hands. What do voters say back to him?
We will see. All right, moving on now to another big story down here in Washington today. The House Judiciary Committee, as we await the former special counsel Robert Mueller's report on Russia to be reviewed by the Attorney General and some of that to be made public, has voted to subpoena the Justice Department to get their hands on that. Let's bring in our Hill reporter, Ben Siegel, who's been tracking the story today. Ben, so help us get our arms around what the committee actually did today on this.
Sure. Well, the committee today took one step forward to issuing that subpoena for Robert Mueller's full report and all the underlying evidence. They've said for a long time their new mantra after the conclusion of Mueller's investigation is release the report. They want the whole thing. They're not going to subpoena for it now. As we know, the Attorney General is going through and redacting certain materials. He wants to release that by mid-April. They're leaving this on the table. Put it another way, Jerry Nadler, the chairman, is putting the subpoena in his back pocket in case Democrats are not satisfied with what Mueller ends up producing, with what Barr ends up producing to Congress in the coming weeks.
And Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the committee, Ben, making very clear today that their mandate as the committee is very different from the one that Bob Mueller and the Attorney General Barr have when assessing the president's behavior. Here's a little bit of the debate that took place today in that committee just before they voted to subpoena the report. Take a listen.
And in any event, the committee has a job to do. The Constitution charges Congress with holding the president accountable for alleged official misconduct. That job requires us to evaluate the evidence for ourselves, not the Attorney General's summary, not a substantially redacted synopsis, but the full report and the underlying evidence.
Unfortunately, as we saw in the first quarter of this committee, we're starting the second quarter of this committee off in the same vein, and that is desperately searching for something on the president.
I should remind everybody, we actually haven't seen the full report. No one, the public, Congress, no one has seen the 400 pages that Robert Mueller spent nearly 2 years drafting, Mary Alice. But what's interesting is Attorney General Barr has said pretty explicitly he will not release the entire report. He's looking at making redactions right now of certain material. He's going to release some more to the public, we think, in the next couple of weeks. But this sort of is a pretty big showdown today. We have the committee with the subpoena. We have Barr saying, I'm not going to give you everything you want. It's going to be a fight.
A fight, and Democrats taking methodical steps along what I think they see as a very long-term fight.
And Ben Siegel, before we let you go, I guess there's a lot of discussion online today about what the precedent is for Congress getting their hands on classified information, grand jury information. Both of those types of materials are in Robert Mueller's report. Has this ever happened before? Has the Justice Department ever turned over those sensitive materials to Congress in a case like this?
Well, Democrats that you hear from on this committee would like you to believe that that is the case. Jerry Nadler, who was on this committee during the Clinton impeachment, he was waving around huge reams of documents the committee received, the public received, from independent counsel Ken Starr's report, which included grand jury information. But Republicans were quick to say that Nadler and other Democrats were trying to compare apples and oranges. These were things that were produced under a different regulation. Grand jury material is very sensitive. You're not allowed to release that publicly because of concerns about besmirching people who were cleared of wrongdoing and other sorts of legal concerns. So this is governed by a certain set of rules, and they're saying that Democrats are trying to push Barr to effectively break the law on this. But as you said, this is a long-term fight, as Mary Alice was exactly right, and these are just some of the opening rounds of the shadow boxing.
And a significant development today, for sure, with the vote on those subpoenas for the Mueller report. We'll see if they actually get sent to the Justice Department. Ben Siegel, thank you so much for that reporting. To the White House now, where there's some breaking reporting just coming in here at ABC News from our Jordan Phelps, our White House reporter. After several days of President Trump touting his secret Republican health care plan that he will roll out in the coming months to replace Obamacare, Jordan, you have just learned from administration sources that the president has no plan, and actually officials over there aren't working to draft one?
Devin, this is just the latest turn in a week and a half of whiplash regarding this issue. Officials tell me, Devin, that there is no legislative proposal being drafted by the White House on health care. The president last night said that there is a great health care plan being drafted by his administration along with members of Congress. So this is a contrast to what the president was saying last night. What officials tell me they are doing is they are drafting out a series of high-level principles that the president would like to see implemented on health care. But Devin, that's obviously a far cry from a legislative proposal, which they would really need to have in hand if they're going to carry through on the president's vision of voting on this first thing in a new session, assuming that the president takes back the White House, Republicans keep the Senate, and they take back the House. So there are a lot of ifs in there, Devin.
That is a lot of ifs. And, you know, the big irony in all of this as well, Mary Alice, is that they had a legislative proposal on the table. The president endorsed it back in 2017. It was called the American Health Care Act. This was the Republican health care plan we heard so much about, the one that the president blames John McCain for voting down with the thumbs down. Had a lot of stuff in there that he said was a great plan. He endorsed it. So it will be interesting to see whether the president comes back and supports this plan, because it was quite controversial at the time.
Yeah, and it failed. You know, it's interesting that it's not just the Republicans in the White House and the administration that aren't drafting a new plan. We've seen very little movement on Capitol Hill with Republicans in terms of any repeal, replace legislation. Yesterday, we had Mitch McConnell and President Trump basically trying to compete with and argue about who was first to say they weren't going to work on health care. And that's just a really stark contrast from Democrats. It's not as though Democrats agree in any way about the best way forward for health care, but they are having a pretty serious debate on the issue.
And we do know, though, that his Republican base is very eager to see any action of any kind. In fact, in a recent poll, USA Today, they said most Republicans actually favor and support getting rid of Obamacare before a replacement plan. They don't really care. Of course, much of the rest of the electorate doesn't share that view. There's a lot of concern out there. So, Jordan Phelps, I guess the big question is, as the president heads out west later this week, he's going to do some campaigning. Why is he picking this fight on health care right now? What are you learning on that front?
Devin, the president's been pretty clear on this point. He feels like Republicans totally lost on this issue. And he's right there. They did lose in 2018, which is why you see the rest of the president's party not wanting to touch this issue. But the president takes big political gambles. We know that about him. And in this case, he's saying he thinks it's worth taking a risk to go back into this issue and try to rebrand it and own it in a positive way, rather than letting Democrats run away with it in 2020. But Devin, the president is really force-feeding his own party here. They do not want to touch this.
All right, Jordan Phelps for us at the White House. Thanks for your reporting, breaking reporting just in from Jordan Phelps. More of that on abcnews.com. Now to a different topic that is taking center stage up on Capitol Hill today. I don't know about you, Mary Alice, but my phone seems to be ringing constantly during the day, and they are not calls that I want. This is part of that robocall epidemic. It's hitting so many of us. In fact, the numbers don't lie. Take a look by one nonprofit organization, UMail. We have now hit an epidemic level of robocalls in this country, 48 billion last year alone. That translates to 1,500 robocalls per second. 56% more over the year before. Congress today, the Senate Commerce Committee taking this on. New piece of legislation that passed that committee unanimously, 26-0. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts is sponsoring the bill. Here's a little bit about what he said he wants to do. Take a listen.
Our goal is to provide authentication so that consumers know who's calling them. Our goal is to make sure that when a call comes into someone's phone, that they know who it is, that there hasn't been a fraudulent manipulation of the number that makes it look like it's someone that the person knows when they don't know them at all. That's the key to this bill, in addition to much tougher penalties which the federal government can impose upon these fraudsters, upon these scammers, upon these tricksters who have insinuated themselves into the lives of every single American.
It would be the most significant piece of robocall legislation in history. It's called the Telephone Robocall Abuse Deterrence Act. It's a mouthful, but there you see some of the steps that it would take if it's enacted. It would step up the ability of the FCC to levy $10,000 fines per call, also tighten up some of the statutes of limitations, among other things, though. But Mary Alice, you know, like just about everything else in this town, it's going to take a long time for anything like that to pass through this Congress, get signed by the president.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, unlike so many things in this town, wouldn't this be pretty bipartisan?
You would think, but how has it gotten this bad?
I don't know, because clearly everyone thinks that they're annoying. And that is one interesting issue where there is often overlap between even really liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, those issues of privacy and civil liberties. So maybe this kind of bill has a shot.
All right, there is hope. Maybe the Senate will take a vote this year, maybe the House after that. Meantime, a growing number of Americans are fighting back. They're taking robocalls into their own hands. They are challenging them, screaming at the person on the phone, buying an app. I don't know. I'm a little bit nicer. I just hit the hang up button. But two guys joining us now from Los Angeles have become YouTube sensations for their efforts to fight back. Independent filmmakers Ashton Bingham and Art Kulik. sort of YouTube social media stars for your valiant efforts. Great to have you guys. You're the heads of Trilogy Media and a very popular channel on YouTube, inspiring frustrated victims everywhere. Tell us a little bit about your channel, what you've been doing, and why you got started with it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, we run Trilogy Media. It's primarily a YouTube channel online where our mission is to seek out these fraudsters, seek out these scammers, which are both domestic and international all over the world, that are calling all over the world, but primarily Americans, pretending to be the IRS, pretending to be tech support, but they're really not. And it's
fake Social Security, like so many scams nowadays.
And you're absolutely right that it's an epidemic. The calls are increasing by the millions, and it's our job to connect with them on the phone, waste their time so they can't scam other people, and also let the scam play out on the phone so other people know how it works and therefore hopefully won't become victim.
And the videos, I got to say, are pretty fun. It's sort of satisfying watching you guys take it to these guys. In fact, in this video we're seeing little footage of here, you were quoting some famous lines from the movie. I mean, who are the people on the other end? What have you been able to figure out through this project about who the people are, who the groups are behind these calls? What do you know about them?
Well, there are thousands of them, and from what we know, thousands of call centers. We've been doing this for, gosh, probably close to 2 years now. We've talked to, I don't know how many hundreds of scammers in that period of time. Every single time it's a different one with a different pretend name, with a different pretend phone number. And but they're overseas. I mean, I would say 99%, if not more, that we talk to are overseas and
Which
pretending
countries?
to be India primarily. But
They claiming as they Pakistani, but they not. They actually calling from India, from illegal call centers.
You'll find the IRS is primarily in India. You'll get the Nigerian like old scams as well too. But I mean, it's really all over the world. But there's definitely a huge epidemic of it over there, and they're targeting us for sure.
Yeah, who are the biggest targets that they prey upon in the United States?
Unfortunately, the biggest target is elderly people because it's so easy to scare them, scam them. They're so gullible, right? They're so naive. And that's why the age range of people getting scammed, unfortunately, it's elderly people.
And the scams are developing and becoming more and more technologically advanced. So those that maybe are a little older and aren't as familiar with social media trends are so easy to fall victim to something.
And what do you guys make of the bill that sailed through the Senate Commerce Committee today? You saw some of the provisions there. They want to tighten the fines, expand the statute of limitations, give the FCC some more power. There was some talk about that authentication measure. They want to require telephone companies to reveal the location of the caller. Do you think any of that will make a difference?
I support the intent, of course. I mean, anything we can do to diminish the frequency of this happening. Unfortunately, like I said, the vast majority of scammers we talk to are from overseas, and they're using some kind of VoIP phone number spoofing app that the phone number comes in. It looks like it's local, or it looks like it's at least a domestic phone number when it's not. And with this click of a button, the number no longer exists. So enforcing that's going to be a tricky, a tall order. But hey, if anything we can do to diminish it is something we support.
And
you
plus,
guys, yeah. Go ahead, Art.
No, and plus, we saved one scammer. We actually moved him from that dirty organization. He's an Indian, right? So we moved him to a safer place, and he told us that his boss, who run all these illegal call centers, he sent his own people to United States of America, paying them so they can find a job to work for like closer to cell phone companies, collect information about us, all the data, and send back to India. And then he will take that information and apply to calling centers. So it's a lot of people involved to scam us Americans. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is incredible, and it's really annoying to so many people. And before we let you go, I mean, what's your biggest piece of advice to all of us who get these calls? What do you recommend, stopping short of filming the counterattack as you guys do? What can all of us do to better defend ourselves?
Well, first of all, remember that the IRS will never call you. That's a huge one, and that's one of the biggest ones that's going around right now. The IRS will never call you demanding money. Overall, just look out for anybody that's asking money from you in an aggressive way, whether that's from Western Union or some kind of gift card thing. Huge red flag there. And finally, subscribe to the Trilogy Media YouTube channel where you can figure out all the scams that are going on. We waste their time, and you'll have a few laughs as well. YouTube.com/Trilogy Media.
They call us nowadays Robin Hoods, and we stood up for the community. And, like if government don't want to fight back, you know what? It's a lot of people who like, okay, guys, let's do it. Let's fight back and let's protect our people, our citizens.
All right, you guys, it's great to have you. Ashton Bingham and Art Kulik with Trilogy Media, two guys fighting the good fight against robocalls. We appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the briefing room, guys.
Thank you so much for
Thank you
having
so
us.
much. Have a good day.
All
Have a
right,
good day.
shifting gears now to a more serious and somber topic, Mary Alice. Today we're seeing protests all around the world, including by the Trump administration and in Hollywood, after the Southeast Asian country of Brunei has announced that they are imposing death by stoning for anyone caught in that country committing gay sex and adultery. It is a shocking development. Brunei, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, it is now the 6th country to impose the death penalty for same-sex relations. The Sultan there, you see on the map where Brunei is, just north of Malaysia, says as an independent Islamic country, they have every right to impose strict Sharia law, which they are doing. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about the latest developments is Neela Ghoshal. She's a senior researcher for LGBT rights at the advocacy group Human Rights Watch. Neela, thanks so much for coming in. What do we know about the LGBT community in Brunei and how they're responding to this new law that's being enforced today?
Well, to be honest, the LGBT community in Brunei has always been quite underground. There has been a law on the books since the colonial times in Brunei that punished gay sex with up to 10 years in prison. And it's an environment in which it's very difficult for LGBT people to find each other, to organize, to speak out for their rights. However, we've been able to talk to a few people there, and they are extremely anxious. They don't know what this new law portends. Obviously, having 10 years in prison on the books was already a grave threat, but the idea that your government is imposing a punishment of stoning completely undermines your humanity. And so people do not know what to expect. They don't know whether the punishments will be implemented or not, but a message has been sent to them that they are second-class citizens and that their lives are essentially worthless in Brunei. This is something that is really horrific and that needs to be reversed.
And are we starting to see an international response to this decision from the country?
We are seeing some international response. The State Department in the U.S. has condemned this law. It's also been condemned by the European Union and by several other countries. What we haven't seen so far, unfortunately, is much of a response from other Asian countries, from other Muslim countries, and yet we know that Brunei is an extreme outlier. Other countries in Asia, other countries that have Muslim majorities don't have such harsh laws on the books for the most part, and so we really need a wider global outcry, making it clear to the government of Brunei that this is completely out of step, that this cannot be tolerated in 2019.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Neela, Brunei does join several other countries. I think we have a graphic of that just to put up to let everybody know what those countries are. Many of them are predominantly Muslim countries. Saudi Arabia, Iran among them, Yemen, Nigeria, you see there. I guess one question I have is, this isn't a new phenomenon, although it's sort of stunning to see yet another country joining that list today. But what level of pressure, I mean, what's it going to take? Can any level of international pressure cause a country like Brunei to change course?
I think Brunei probably does need to feel this in their pockets. I think this needs to become politically risky and unsustainable for them. Brunei is a member of the international community. They're part of the Commonwealth. They're involved in different international forums. And they need to know that they will become a pariah state if these kinds of punishments are actually implemented. The law was previously proposed in 2013, and there was dramatic international outcry. And Brunei stepped back. They didn't enact the harshest punishments at that time. They waited 5 years. They waited until the furor had calmed down, until nobody was talking about Brunei, until Europe and the U.S. were caught up in their own internal dramas. And I think perhaps they thought that they could pass this law quietly and get away with it. And I think it's the responsibility of the international community to stand up again and say, no, you won't get away with it. This is unacceptable.
And the Trump administration saying just that today, among another of other global protests. Neela Ghoshal with the Human Rights Watch organization. Thanks so much for coming in, Neela.
Thank you for having me.
And finally today, and on a lighter note, a happier note, in the city of Chicago, they made some history overnight, Mary Alice. We talked about this yesterday here in the briefing room. The largest American city to elect an African-American woman as mayor, and also the first openly gay mayor of Chicago.
Yeah, the city is really turning a leaf. I mean, we're talking about a city that's had a long history of kind of entrenched Democratic politics, and she ran as an outsider, never elected to office before, and that was shocking to a lot of people that she rose through the ranks so quickly. She defeated 13 other Democrats in the race there and came out on top.
And
new day for Chicago.
A political outsider. She is Lori Lightfoot, former prosecutor. She replaces Rahm Emanuel, and she had this to say before her crowd of supporters last night.
These and other reforms will transform the lives of people who look like us, transform the lives of working families like the one that I grew up in. Today is April 3rd, a new day for all of Chicago.
A new day in Chicago, indeed. Lori Lightfoot elected as the new mayor and first African-American woman mayor of that city. That's all we have today here in the briefing room. Thanks for joining us here on ABC News Live. You can catch us every day here, 3:30 Eastern Time, for the latest and all the political headlines of the day. Great to have our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks, here. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you tomorrow.